Hey guys, Julian here. Today I'm going to be talking to you about making the Viper Diva style of hard melodic techno. I'm going to be showing you guys a bunch of new stuff that I haven't shown you before, some ways to make it cleaner, and also just make the tracks better than I've ever shown you before. As usual, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video that you just heard in the intro is available right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp. So definitely go grab that if you haven't already. It's a really great way to support me. And yeah, let's dive in. So, right up at the top here, we have kind of like the percussion, which starts with this layer. This is a nice classic rave loop, again, one of those very like 90s, 2000s style of loops. And I think what really makes these powerful in these types of tracks is not just the fact like, oh, it's, classic rave or whatever. Because if you think about it, like, you don't take the kick from, like, classic 90s rave tracks, and you're not taking, like, a lot of the sounds from there. I really think that this is about juxtaposition. It's about the fact that you're hearing something that, like, almost sounds like it's just a whole track from the 90s. Layered in with all this stuff. And so that's a big thing to think about. Is like, it's not like we're just trying to only do the old school thing, because if you only do that, you're going to be really lost. Electronic music, and especially techno, is about the future. It's about creating the future. Now, sometimes the future has little shades of the past painted in there, but ultimately, it's not about just, oh, let's just bring it back to 90s, 2000s, because that's boring. That's already been done. But obviously, bringing something like that in can be very cool, and then kind of combining it with this like futuristic melodic stuff. So that's kind of the idea with that. And also, you notice I keep that completely dry. You really don't want to process these too much. It's about starting with something that has a lot of texture to it, and then maybe processing it for like 10% more power. But you really aren't gonna get, like, you don't want to start with something that you have to do all this processing to. This sound, find something that has a really good texture to it already. Then we have these two little sounds. So you can see, these are actually kind of similar, right? Like, one of these is actually made out of a rave loop with some delay on it. I just took, like, I'll show you the original sample. And then you can see, yeah, I just reversed that little hi-hat, and then we just took that little chunk. And then what happens is you're hearing it, like, I'll play it with the kick so you can kind of see what I mean. Right, it's like where that's fitting into the beat, that. And then we have this effects on top of it, which is literally just like a little effect sound. I added a little fade on it. And you hear that just kind of like adds a little bit more to that overall thing. Now, I think this kind of an element, like having these kind of like atmospheric percussions that are just coming in and out, I think that's really important, because if you don't have that, like, it's a little too like kind of unrelenting, if that makes any sense. Like, all of this stuff is great, but it's very like over and over. So on its own, it's only one thing, right? There's no contrast there. That's why we have these. It's because now inside of the drum loop, we have some things that are constantly going, and then some things that only hit a little bit at a time. And you can see it adds that space to the groove, and already, like, it's just so much more intense and grooving. So that's how I try to think about that. And that's really important. And I think that's one of those things that's really easy to overlook if you aren't really thinking about what you're doing. But yeah, then we just have a nice fat open hi-hat, 909. We have a ride as well, which is just doing that kind of thing with the velocity. But then you can see I've got three effects on here. We have an EQ8, which is cutting out on the low end, and also cutting out like the little bit of messy high frequencies. And then also boosting a little bit of high frequencies. So here's without this. And with it, you can hear it's just a lot cleaner. Then we have this echo, so here's without this. And then with it, so what this is doing is it's a really fast echo on the ping pong mode. So you get this like very fast panning left and right thing. and ultimately that creates like a really wide stereo image, which is typically what you want for your ride. You don't really want it to be down the center. You want it to be a bit wider, kind of more open and spread out. And then I have an auto pan here, and this is just bouncing. Right, it's meant to be like that fake sidechain, so to speak, to the kick. Then we have the clap, which I guess is kind of more like a snare. This one's pretty simple. I guess the main thing to keep in mind with this one is just the type of sound, right? It's not like a small clap. You really want this big, fat, like kind of sound, so it'll really hit with the kick. You know, you want it to be not you know, that's not gonna work. You need the full punch there. And then we have the kick. And so the kick is made with 3 layers. We have our kick. Which, yeah, this is just one of my punchy hard techno kicks that I've made here. You can hear it's got a very, like, mid-rangey sound to it. That's, I think, what makes these, is they have that, like, in the mid-range. Versus, like, a normal techno kick, I think would be a little bit more like low end and high end focused. So we got that. Then we have this roll, which is made using that same kick. It's just playing 16th notes, and then I have it being filtered and actually distorted and then sidechained to the kick. So the reason why we have this is really just for the overall thing. Here's without it. And then with it. We already have a bass, so we don't need this to be like a deep bass rumble. But just by having this, go like that, it's just adding so much more energy to the kick. And I think that's really important. This was one of those elements, like I was at the end of this, and I was wondering why it didn't quite sound all the way there. This is one of those things that you need, because it's adding that like, which even though it might seem quiet, again, when I turn it off and on, you hear the difference. Like, it's just adding a lot of energy to the track. And then we have the bass. And so this is actually made using a new method. I might have shown this on here before, but you probably haven't seen it. So basically, all we're doing to make the bass here, it's actually a very simple way of doing it. It's just a kick sample, so this is the kick that we're using. Right? Just like, you want to find a kick that is already pretty bassy. That's kind of the thing to it. But then we're just stretching that out, actually. You can see, I actually like, so that's the warp marker that I made, and I just stretched it out. We're on complex mode here, and then you pitch it. And then the secret is you just get rid of the transient with the fade, right? If I put that back. See, it sounds weird. So you just get rid of that. And now you have this awesome bass. And then I just have a little bit of distortion blended in there. And then it's being sidechained to the main kick. And yes, it's a new way of making the bass. I think it has a lot more texture to it, right? You get that nice, like, grindy, like, like it's a really, like, like, grunt bass, you know? Oh yeah, and then on the group here, we have 3 effects. We have a little bit of saturation blended in, not much, but just a little bit like this, I think. There's without it. And with it, you can hear it just kind of glues everything together. Then we have a limiter. Here's without that. And with it, you can hear glues everything together and brings everything up to around the same level, so it'll be really nice and fat and full. And then we have an EQ cutting out the lows. And this might seem bad, but yeah, you usually want to cut at about like 20 to 40 hertz. Reason being, you're not really hearing that range. But it still can add kind of nasty stuff to your mix that's going to mess it up and ultimately get in the way of having the cleanest, loudest master. So we just cut that out to make sure that it's not in there. And yeah, that's it for the kick. Then we have this reese bass. So this is a pretty simple pattern. We're in the key of G minor, and I think what really makes it cool is just very careful attention to the voices that we're using inside of this G minor scale, right? So like here, for example, we start on the root, and then we go right up to the 6th, which obviously has a little bit of a I don't want to say dissonant feel, but it's kind of like not resolving perfectly, right? Like, you know, that fifth root note to sixth is kind of dark sounding, but then we resolve it really nicely on that fourth there, right? So you go, and then you end it there on the seventh, which maybe you might be expecting something more like, right? But then we kind of like take that away and instead go here. But this actually resolves better back to this root note here, because if you look, this is really just two notes down, so it's like you're going. So yeah, it's just like kind of understanding that like resolution and kind of building tension inside of the progression. And yeah, and then for the sound on this one, this is made with wavetable. Now, it's one layer. We have a saw wave, and then another saw wave, which is detuned quite a bit. Those are just going through a little bit of a low-pass filter with the OSR setting on. And then I have a bit of unison. And yeah, so that's creating the sort of like super saw, reese bass sound. Then we have some chorus, just to spread the sound out a little bit more. I'm not really too concerned about actual like deep bass frequencies with this sound, because, I mean, it's... Yeah, you can hear it's not really meant to be for the actual low bass, because we have a rumble bass for that. Right, and this is just filling in like the bass notes in the chord progression. So then I have this audio effect track, and this is multi-band distortion. So you can see we've got a wave shaper on the highs, this amp on the mids, and then the lows are dry. But yeah, so here's without this. And then with it. So I think this is the best way to really make your own basses, but also to make something just really like different, you know? Because obviously like that reese bass sound of two saw waves detuned, maybe with some unison, maybe with a filter, depending on how you set it up. We've all heard that so many times. Anyone who listens to like one electronic music playlist has heard that bass, right? So this is a way that you can take it and do your own thing with it, because you're just basically shaping the sound however you want with the distortion. And you see these are all blended. That's the secret, is that you're actually still hearing this dry bass. You're still hearing that the whole time. It's just now we have a little bit of these extra kind of like crunchier layers blended on top of that. And that's what you want. But it's always going to be more of the unaffected signal actually. Like, because if you look at it, you can see like 32%, 32.5%. Like, none of these are that wet. It's just like, yeah, letting that shine. And then we have a compressor, which is just sidechaining this to the kick. A high-pass filter. Again, we don't want this to actually be in the low end. And yeah, then we have this trance lead. So here's the MIDI for this one. It's also just using notes in the G minor scale. But again, we're getting very creative with it. So here, for example. So that's the 4th, 7th, 6th, and 5th. Right? But you almost get like a C minor chord there, because you have, if this was a C minor chord, right? Like that's a whole chord in and of itself. And then over here we have this. Again, we're kind of playing with it. You know, this, even though again we're still in G minor, we're kind of using it as if it was like a major scale, right? Because we're using as if this was like D sharp major. And then that would be like the major 7. So it's not as tricky as it sounds. Again, look up like a G minor scale or whatever key you're in. Look up that scale. Or if you know it, use that scale. But just try to get a little bit creative with it. It's like I was saying with the reese bass. It's like just doing stuff that is kind of flipping it on its head and looking to the future rather than like, you know, what is the smoothest thing. And also I think the pattern has a big part of it. That no. But the other thing with this is really just making sure that it's kind of playing off what like the chord progression is doing, right? Like every time we get a note change here, it's kind of corresponding with a note change in the bass. yeah, it's all fitting together. You know, it's not just like, woo, here's cool crazy notes in the G minor scale, but it's starting with like a solid bass line like that, and then you write this over top of it, and still doing the technique of trying to get creative with the same scale, but just like very much making sure that when you're listening to it, it sounds like it's fitting into what the bass is also doing. And then for the sound, this one's pretty simple. It's like a transient lead, so we've got this nice, just one saw wave here. It's this unison noise here. I've also got this on the mono setting with some glide. I've got an echo, as well as a little bit of reverb on this. A high pass, a little bit of drum bus as well, which is blended on just to make this fatter and more kind of like crunchy and full. We have a compressor, which is sidechaining into the kick. And then another EQ8, which is just cutting out the lows after the drum bus. And yeah, and then the last sound down here is the synth string. Now I'm going to play this with the bass line as well, and you'll notice something. So, what is going on here? Well, obviously you can see the bass notes actually in here. So this is playing, you'll notice every single time that the bass changes, this changes as well. And it's meant to be following that exactly, right? That's how you write this kind of a layer. It's not just about the sound. It's about the fact that the notes are, and the changes specifically, are matching with the bass line. They're not playing the same notes as the bass line. They're changing at the same time. And then this is kind of playing its own melody that plays interestingly off of the bass, but it's not just like a basic harmony to the bass. It's just like notes that are going to sound really good over top of that, basically. But if you look, a lot of these are actually pretty close together. Right? Like, that's just 6th, 5th, root note. You know, pretty basic. But then I take that and put it up like a few octaves, and then you go, you know, and it sounds crazy. And then for the sound, this is also made with wavetables, so it's just one saw wave, noise unison, bit of reverb, high pass, and then it's being sidechained. And it's pretty straightforward. It's really more about the notes it's playing, and then having the cool sound is going to add to that. And yeah. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video. It's available right at the top of the description. Again, guys, really help support me if you enjoyed these videos. Definitely go grab that so I can keep going and keep bringing you guys more new videos every single day. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for the support, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.